SWOT Your Life, From Corporate Strategy to Personal Mastery by Walter Freeman. Chapter 4. The Vitality Overhaul. When your body becomes your strategy. Here's something they don't tell you about success. It's physically exhausting. Every ambitious thing you want to do, building a career, raising children, maintaining relationships, pursuing passions, requires energy. Not metaphorical energy. Actual, physical, biochemical energy that your body either produces or doesn't. And most people are running on fumes. They're sleeping 6 hours when they need 8. They're eating whatever's convenient rather than whatever fuels them. They're exercising sporadically or not at all. They're ignoring warning signs because they're too busy to address them. Then they wonder why they can't focus at work, why they snap at their kids, why they spend weekends recovering instead of living. Your health isn't separate from your strategy. It's the foundation of your strategy. Everything else you want to achieve depends on a body and mind that can show up and perform. This chapter is about treating your health the way a good company treats its infrastructure, as a strategic asset that requires honest assessment and deliberate investment. The executive who couldn't climb stairs. Mike was 50 years old and successful by every conventional measure. He'd spent 25 years climbing the corporate ladder at a tech company, and now he ran a division of 300 people. His house was paid off. His kids were in college. His marriage was solid. By his own accounting, he'd won. Except for one thing. He couldn't climb 2 flights of stairs without getting winded. Mike had gained 40 pounds since his 30s. His doctor had mentioned pre-diabetes at his last checkup, whenever that was. He slept 5 hours a night and needed 3 cups of coffee to function. His back hurt constantly. He told himself this was just what happened when you were successful and busy, the price of achievement. Then his father had a heart attack at 72, survived but barely. And Mike looked in the mirror and saw a man on the same trajectory. I asked Mike to do a health SWOT. Not a medical diagnosis, he had doctors for that, but a strategic assessment of where he stood and what was possible. Strengths. He was genuinely competitive, which had served him well in business. He had access to excellent health care and the money to use it. His wife was supportive and had been asking him to take better care of himself for years. He had 20 years of cycling experience from his 30s that his body still remembered. And despite everything, his blood work wasn't catastrophic yet. He had time to turn things around. Weaknesses. He'd completely disconnected from his body's signals. He ate whatever was in front of him without thinking. He hadn't exercised intentionally in 5 years. He used busyness as an excuse to avoid dealing with his health. He slept less than he needed and wore his exhaustion as a badge of honor. And he had no accountability, no trainer, no workout partner, no one who would notice if he skipped a workout. Opportunities. His company offered excellent gym subsidies he'd never used. Fitness trackers had gotten sophisticated enough to make progress visible and gamified, something his competitive nature would respond to. His daughter had just started running marathons and would love a training partner. And remote work meant he no longer had to commute, which gave him back an hour a day he could use differently. Threats. His family history of heart disease meant he was playing with loaded dice. His current trajectory led to diabetes within 5 years. His back problems would get worse without intervention, and his career required energy he wouldn't have if he continued declining. Looking at this map, Mike saw something that had been invisible to him. His health wasn't a personal failing. It was a strategic problem with strategic solutions. He didn't need willpower. He needed a plan. He bought a fitness tracker and connected it to a cycling app that let him compete virtually with other riders, turning his competitive drive into a health asset. He started training with his daughter on weekends, which gave him accountability and improved their relationship simultaneously. He worked with a nutritionist to understand what he was actually eating rather than what he thought he was eating. And he started treating sleep the way he treated important meetings: non-negotiable, scheduled, protected. A year later, Mike had lost 35 pounds. His prediabetes had reversed. He was sleeping 7 hours and needed 1 cup of coffee. And he completed a century ride, 100 miles, with his daughter. The transformation wasn't about suddenly becoming a different person. It was about seeing his situation clearly and responding to what he saw. The burnout that wasn't. Aiko was 28 and convinced she was burned out. She worked at a major consulting firm in Tokyo, putting in 12-hour days in a culture that equated presence with dedication. She came home exhausted, couldn't sleep, couldn't concentrate, and had started having panic attacks on Sunday evenings as the work week approached. When she described her symptoms, I thought they sounded less like classic burnout and more like something physical. I asked her to do a health SWOT, focusing on what was actually happening in her body, not what she assumed was happening. Strengths. She had access to good health care through her employer. She'd practiced yoga in college and still remembered how good it made her feel. She was young and, as far as she knew, had no serious underlying conditions. She had a mother who was a nurse and kept asking if she was okay. And she was motivated. She didn't want to feel this way. Weaknesses. She hadn't had a real checkup in 3 years. She'd given up all the things that used to help her manage stress: yoga, time with friends, walks in nature. She was surviving on convenience store food and energy drinks. She'd been dismissing her body's signals as weakness, pushing through rather than listening. And she had no idea what her actual energy patterns were, when she naturally had energy versus when she was forcing it. Opportunities. Japan was investing heavily in mental health resources following national attention to workplace wellness. Forest bathing, structured time in nature, had become a recognized therapy with programs she could access. Her firm had just introduced a wellness subsidy she hadn't used. And mindfulness apps had gotten good enough to make meditation accessible even to skeptics. Threats. Karoshi, death from overwork, was a documented phenomenon in her country. Her firm's culture rewarded suffering in ways that would punish her for seeking balance. Her career was at a stage where stepping back might mean falling behind permanently, and whatever was happening in her body would get worse if she ignored it. The SWOT revealed something important. Aiko didn't actually know what was wrong. She was treating herself like she was broken without diagnosing the break. That was the first problem to solve. She went to a doctor, actually went for the first time in years. It turned out she was severely deficient in vitamin D and iron, common in young professional women who live on processed food and never see sunlight. Not burnout, malnutrition. With supplements addressing the deficiency, many of her symptoms improved within weeks. But the SWOT had revealed something else. Even once she felt better, she'd go right back to the pattern that had depleted her unless she changed something structural. She started taking her lunch breaks outside, even if just for 15 minutes, exposing herself to natural light and giving her brain a midday reset. She joined a forest bathing program on weekends. She used the wellness subsidy for a meditation app that helped her sleep. And she started having honest conversations with her manager about sustainable performance rather than heroic suffering. The conversations were terrifying, but her manager, it turned out, had watched other promising analysts flame out completely, lately. He'd rather have Aiko performing at 90% sustainably than 110% until she broke. A year later, Aiko was still at the firm, still ambitious, still working hard. But she'd learned to distinguish between the work that moved her career forward and the suffering that her culture mistook for dedication. She'd built a life that included her body, not one that treated her body as an obstacle. Your health SWOT. Your body is sending you signals right now. Some you're hearing, some you're dismissing. Some you've learned to ignore so completely that you don't even notice them anymore. A health SWOT is about getting honest with those signals, and with the context that determines what you can do about them. For strengths, consider: what does your body do well? What healthy habits do you already have? What resources do you have access to? Healthcare, gym, time, support. What knowledge do you have about what works for you? What aspects of your health have you maintained well? What advantages do you have that you might be taking for granted? For weaknesses, consider: what signals is your body sending that you've been ignoring? What habits are hurting you? What don't you know about your health that you should? What have you been meaning to address but haven't? What patterns keep showing up in how you feel? What are you using to cope that might be making things worse? For opportunities, consider, what resources are available that you're not using? What technologies could help you track or improve? Who could support you? Friends, professionals, communities? What small changes might yield big results? What's changed recently that might make improvement easier? What worked for you in the past that you've stopped doing? For threats, consider, what risks does your family history suggest? What's unsustainable about your current trajectory? What problems might get worse if you ignore them? What parts of your environment or lifestyle are actively harmful? What could go wrong that would force change? And would you rather change before or after that happens? Once you've filled in the quadrants, look for connections. Mike found that his competitive nature, strength, could be channeled through fitness tracking, opportunity, to overcome his lack of accountability, weakness, and address his heart disease risk, threat. Aiko found that her yoga background, strength, could help her address the cultural pressure, threat, if she combined it with the wellness resources, opportunity, she'd been ignoring. Your connections will be different, but they're there, waiting to be seen. Your body isn't just the vehicle that carries your brain around. It's the foundation of every strategy, every relationship, every accomplishment you want to achieve. Treat it that way.